Hello, and welcome to our webcast entitled Red Teaming, the Essential Tool for Security Leaders. My name is Trevin Edgeworth, and I am the Red Team Practice Director at Bishop Fox. Our firm provides a full range of offensive security services from product and application security testing to all the types and variations of pen testing, so network, cloud, AI, both point in time types of assessments as well as continuous through our Cosmos platform. So I lead specifically Red Team services, which are different approaches that are about objective-based adversary emulation. So whereas some offensive security methodologies are more about assessing every possibility, answering the questions around vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, Red Teams are more about playing out different types of attack scenarios of concern within your environment so that you can gain answers to the questions that you have. Things like, could a specific attack scenario happen to us, or would a very specific threat actor be able to accomplish their attack objectives, or what paths might they likely take in our specific environment, or would our controls prevent or detect the activities, and would our teams respond properly to mitigate the threat as it's happening. So these kinds of insights, very valuable to security executives. Within our Red Team services, we have Purple Teaming, which is much more about like structured practice and coaching with your defenders to kind of help ensure that when adversaries are trying specific things, doing specific things within your environment, they're seeing them, they're responding them appropriately. It's getting through the full detection chain in ways that it should. And just like a batting coach might help a player with their specific hitting fundamentals during batting practice, that's how that is. It's a very open book, very collaborative. It's about the player getting better. And then we have Red Teaming, which is let's now put all of that training and those fundamentals to the test through an actual game. Let's see how it's all coming together collectively through a full, realistic end-to-end attack scenario. That's the difference there. And then we also do cybersecurity tabletops, which are much more about role-playing a specific scenario to help strengthen your overall organizational response. These are usually around hypothetical attack scenarios instead of more like live fire on your network, to see how well your key players, the members of your crisis management team and other groups, are following your incident response plans and processes. So within those, we're able to cover the full spectrum of attack surface. So from your traditional network and apps and cloud stuff to physical breach, to your of your buildings and things like badge cloning or bypass techniques, as well as social engineering. So phishing, vishing, SMS. And we also have a very, very strong expertise around deepfakes, both voice and video. And I'm not able to change these slides here. There we go. I've been around the industry for a little while, over a couple of decades. I don't do a ton of public speaking, so my pronouns are who, he. But I am, however, really close to finishing a book with a major publisher about building red teams, which is my career passion. I have been really fortunate throughout my life to have been able to build several red team programs for financial institutions, for tech companies, and I get to help our customers build their own internal red team programs also as part of what I do now through a series of collective workshops that I do, which is something that I really love doing. I also have led several cyber threat intelligence programs, which I also really love doing. And I think it is a perfect complement to red teaming. If you're going to emulate an adversary, how do you know that adversary if not through legitimate threat intelligence? One of the most rewarding aspects of my job is being able to have early stage conversations with security leaders, like many of you who are joining this today. I get to hear about challenges. I get to hear about threats that you're facing, your goals, your aspirations, what interesting things you're doing to secure your environments. And I get to work with you to adapt and tailor attack scenarios that will answer those big questions that you have about your security program. And I get to give you insights that you need to make super important decisions that you need to make in your security organizations. And when you think about it, we get to see and operate in many hundreds of different environments, each doing things in their own kind of slightly nuanced way, such that for any given question, whether hey, what's the best way to approach this or solve that, almost never do we run into a case where we don't have reference points for different things we've seen in different environments that have worked. So it might very well be the greatest professional education available, actually, as I think about it. But I wanted to start off by sharing with you, based on this perspective that we get with customers, right, the most common reasons that security leaders are looking for red team engagements. So the first of those is they are looking to grow through adversity. Okay, so there's a concept, it's called anti-fragility. That was developed by a person named Nassim Nicholas Taleb. He's got a book out there, you can search him up. But it describes fragile systems and processes as being not able to resist or recover when they're faced with stressors or shocks. When my daughter was 4 years old, we were at a gift shop. She dropped a porcelain cat. It broke its leg off. And I said, I have to pay for this now. What are we going to do with it now? And she said, maybe we can give it to someone who likes broken cats. So porcelain cat was clearly a fragile system. But then you've got resilient systems, which may actually sound like the opposite, but it's not quite. Okay, resilient systems like a modern building or maybe a modern bridge, these are able to withstand enormous stress successfully and return to their same position as they were in before and stay the same, right? That's a good thing. But anti-fragile systems actually go a little bit beyond that. They actually improve and strengthen the apparatus, like our minds or our muscles or our confidence after getting dumped in high school. And security leaders are wanting their organizations to get better and to build new neural paths or new muscle memory or strengthen their collective defenses. But they know that can't happen without the adversity, right? No pain, no gain. And they prefer for that adversity to not get them on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. So we, Red Team, one of the largest tech companies in the world, their first operation, which we did over 4 years ago, was very hard for them to accept, right? It was pretty thorough compromise through a lot of different paths, but they were extremely Kaizen, very continuous improvement about this. And they took that findings report very seriously and implemented some of the thematic things we pointed out and we rarely see customers do. If you're in a room with 100 CISOs and you ask them who has successfully implemented LDAP signing, you might get 0 hands, okay? And if someone does raise their hand, well, that just might be our tech customer who is incredibly anti-fragile and is now one of the toughest environments for us to Red Team. They are not a porcelain cat. So we simulate and we emulate so that you grow stronger like those anti-fragile systems. And secondly, they come to us because, no organization has unlimited resources. And after $20 million in annual OPEX and another $5 million in CAPEX, a security leader is looking to answer still that question, am I vulnerable? Am I vulnerable to the attacks that are most likely to happen to me? Where are we maybe over-indexing and where do we have gaps? Where are we maybe redundant and have things that are doing the same thing versus not doing anything at all? And so, where are we missing controls? And what can I incorporate into my 3-year roadmap for my security organization? A brand new CISO of a major trading platform comes to me and says, I've just inherited this security organization. We know there are issues. If I don't see the fire, I'm seeing the smoke from that. I am formulating my plan to overhaul the entire security program here, and I need help, right? I need to know what my biggest areas of need are from a standpoint of the confidentiality, the integrity of transactions occurring over our network, and availability as well. But they had a budget that was due in 2 months. They saw these Red Team scenarios as a way to kind of drive and prioritize these new initiatives that they knew they were going to cost, money and time on things there. So with this new CISO, we were able to kind of show, the collective security apparatus through the lens of an actual real world end-to-end attack. So, and they were able to gain the proof beyond the hypothetical, the theoretical, the speculation of what was being told to them by that organization. And they were able to get clarity around what they needed to go and do, and where investments were needing to be made there. And you can't answer that through debate. You can't answer that through speculation. You can't even answer it through telemetry. You answer that by proving, by putting your organization through the paces of an actual real attack and taking those results to heart, like our anti-fragile customer that I mentioned there. So it also gave them a story, right? It is both the left brain and the right brain. You get the left brain logical of how to go from system to system, but then you got a narrative, you got a story that's going to resonate with your business unit leaders, that can connect to business impact and resonate, so that those key members that need to be bought in are in on your initiatives there. Next, they come to us for validation. That does sound a little neurotic, but it's in a good way in this case. These are people that don't take things at face value, and they trust but verify, right? Trust but verify, that comes from Russian. Dovery ni proverje. Don't judge my Russian. It's the only phrase I know, except for Jalablutebin, which is I love you. But we had a customer, a major investment firm, and they had just changed their managed SOC provider. They had an MSSP that they really liked. They liked the people there. But they had a red team done on that MSSP by a different firm. That red team tore their MSSP apart in very, very embarrassing fashion, and then turned around and said, see, if you had gone with our MSSP, you would have stopped this attack. And they ended up winning over that deal, that customer to their own MSSP. Well, 3 months into that engagement, that security leader had some buyer's remorse, like when I bought 12 months of dance classes for Christmas. And then they got to wondering, how do I know if this MSSP, this new one, is seeing what they should be doing? They are my SOC. I'm not going to run 2 SOCs in parallel. So how would I know if they were bad? If a tree falls in the forest, right? That's the cliche, right? If an incident were to happen and my MSSP is telling me all is quiet on the Western Front, how am I to know anything different? Well, he did have the answer right the first time, right? But in that case, it was used as leverage to steal the MSSP business. Bishop Fox is offensive security only. We don't have an MSSP to sell you. So we are offensive security only. We're just going to tell you the truth no matter what it is. But it turned out that the new MSSP was just as bad, if not worse than the old one, but their MSSP was just better at detecting their own red team. So you got to be careful of that. But and we were able to shine a light on that. We actually do get asked to validate third-party MSSPs quite often, SOCs quite a bit. And in this case, this one didn't do so well at all. But actually, there have been other cases where we come back and say, you know what, stay with them. They're doing really good. Here's what we found. So we're able to kind of provide that validation. You can't get that level of insight from an actual attack either. You'll know. Yes, it's free from a standpoint of you don't have to pay someone to do the attack, but it's going to be more expensive anyway. But you'll know you were breached and they took off with your customer PII or whatever it was. But you won't have the full picture of everything that they tried, even after all the forensics, because they are not your friend. Red teams will give you the full narrative and of what they tried, what worked, what didn't, how you can stop them the next time they're your sparring partner, and they're there just for you to get better. I got to check the chat because I'm seeing some questions there. Okay, so lastly, they want to see how the human element of incident coordination is within their organization when it's under fire, of an actual incident. So the human element of security is one of the most difficult to assess outside of an incident or a red team exercise. So do people know that the IR playbook even exists? Do they even know their role in it? Or if a major or incident or breach were to happen, would the key people be like searching your intranet to try to find the IR playbook, speed reading that, or do they kind of know their role naturally? Especially in larger organizations, security can get really siloed to where people aren't on the same page. We see it often, and that can be tested and drilled really, really well through red teaming and tabletops. A tabletop especially has a way of really teasing out bad decisions and bad decision making at a time when you can more easily correct them, when you have that time, instead of during a breach when the sad choices actually will cost you. So that's one angle as to the why. Why our customers are coming looking for red teams. And again, red teaming is adversary emulation. We mimic the behaviors and the TTPs of real world adversaries. So it is incredibly important that our firm, that we keep a finger on the pulse of that threat landscape. And part of how we do that is by listening to you, the CISOs from all of the different industries and different areas. And so we learn about the threat landscape, what's impacting them through those conversations. And I just wanted to take some time to kind of talk about that threat landscape as we see it ourselves and as we hear it from you, because it is evolving before our very eyes. And the types of threat trends and themes that security leaders are worried about these days, I think, are ones that are going to change offensive security and defensive security forever. They'll never be the same, right? These shape our approaches as red teamers, and it should come as no surprise that AI is the common thread with many of these. It is the new force to be reckoned with in a lot of different ways. So top of mind for most of you is agentic AI, and what role is that going to play in tomorrow's attacks? Now, I've been to conferences like FSISAC where like a lot of the conversation is around AI and very little is about anything else. And it's always been kind of like this is brewing, but it's always kind of near distant future or the distant future. But just last month, you can Google this, Anthropic released an analysis of an attack that they observed a few months previously in, I want to say September, by a Chinese threat actor group that they're calling GTG 1002. It targeted 30 different entities. There were several successful intrusions. This is the first ever documented case of a cyber attack that was largely executed without any human intervention at all, where at scale, where AI found vulnerabilities in targets, successfully exploited them in live operations, and then went on to perform a wide range of post-exploitation analysis, lateral movement, privacy, data access, data exfil. And it's the first documented case of agentic AI obtaining access to high-value targets for intelligence collection and espionage. So your tech companies, your government agencies, that kind of a thing. So it wasn't perfect. Claude hallucinated, right? It hallucinated many things in this from the vantage of Anthropic. But it's there, right? So thinking about the ransomware space in particular, over the many years that we've been dealing with the ransomware problem, extortion-driven intrusions and the like, there have been absolute pendulum swings between automation-heavy approaches and then human-heavy approaches. And we are definitely on the cusp of another major swing that is driven largely by agentic AI. So early 2000s, full-on automation, very careless, very volumetric. It was WannaCry. It was not Petya. It was CryptoLocker. These were very much spray and pray, broad, fully automated, indiscriminate, and volume-based with very little human involvement in it. And then around 2016, that pendulum swung hard towards very targeted, very human-led operations, because now we had access brokers and a full, almost like a business ecosystem of affiliates and ransomware as a service, and not only humans behind it, but there were full teams and like companies behind these with the ability to know and apply business and mission context. So tailoring that towards what scenario would produce the most pain to this target such that they'll be motivated to pay an extortion demand. And so then LLMs entered the picture, okay, which started to help to make phishing pretext a little bit harder to spot. It also helped a little bit with basic recon, right? Maybe some password spraying or analysis of the large volumes of data you get from running tools. But what's coming en masse, okay, is ransomware and other attacks with agentic AI at the center, which can be persistent and autonomous and can make its own decisions. So a shift back to automated, fully automated almost, right? But intelligently. This is not spray and pray automated. This is intelligent decision making. And it's not just a ransomware specific problem. It could be DDoS or hacktivism or any other types of targeted attacks. So humans are not going to fully exit that ecosystem. They're going to stay as orchestrators for the most part. They will maybe negotiate ransoms. They'll maintain the infrastructure behind botnets and things like that. But a lot of the heavy hitting and the heavy lifting of the other tasks is going to be left in the hands of agentic AI, LLMs. And in many ways, it's going to lower the barriers of the technical know-how barriers of entry for criminal groups across that full attack chain to allow better speed, better sophistication, better scalability. So that is something that is coming. And how do we prepare for it from a defender perspective? Well, red teams need to be able to adapt and need to adapt just as the attackers are, or you are going to be emulating the attackers of the past, the slow attackers of the past. So at Bishop Fox, we spend a lot of time and effort on what we call our Iron Man suit, right? The tooling, the automation that our consultants that are driving it use to do very powerful things. And so much of that is now incorporating AI in ways that make us smarter, faster, and more scalable, and doing that securely as well. So we're not leaving data outside of our where we have control of it. So related to that, gotta get to the next one here. I already touched on AI being used for generating more convincing SE pretext, social engineering pretext. The days of poor spelling and grammar as telltales of a fish are waning. Now we just need regexes for M dashes. This isn't just a grammar and spelling change. It is attackers can feed information about a target, and they can get all sorts of excellent ideas for appropriate pretexts, custom pretext customized to that particular target. So, adding agentic AI and autonomous decision-making to this makes it very, very scary. So one capability we've really invested in the past several years as a firm is voice and video deepfake. The Bishop in Bishop Fox, it comes from that movie Sneakers. If any of you are old enough to remember that one, Martin Bishop, who was the Red Team practice director for Martin Bishop and Associates. In that movie, they have to get past a voice authenticator and they have to say, my voice is my passport, in the exact same way as a scientist or a specific employee in that company would say it so that they can get access to a secure part of the facility there. So one of them is able to go out on a date with this target, and through conversation, they're able to get them to say each of those words separately, one by one. I like your accent. Can you say the word passport? And so he says passport, and that's the last word that they needed. And they splice those together, and they're able to get past the door. Well, voice authentication is a very, very bad idea. And you might say, we would never use such a stupid, ridiculous control. But, I beg to differ with you. Because maybe you don't have the technical control that's doing voice, validation or authentication. But when we call your help desk, okay, with the voice of their boss over that service desk, and we say, hi, Jim, this is Paul, your manager. I'm at lunch with Ann, our CIO, and she lost access to her email from her phone, and it's prompting her for a new password. Can you please reset it and tell me what you reset it to so she can get her email or reset her MFA token or whatever that is? That help desk ends up being very, very helpful indeed. So it's that familiarity. With that familiarity, they'll throw all process out the window. And that has been something that we are highly, highly successful in with service desks and their bosses. So you do. It's just a personal control that you're looking for, a human control. But one of the guys on my team runs the deepfake part of the DEF CON AI Village, and he turned me into a live version of Ryan Reynolds, right? It was a chubby Ryan Reynolds, but it was Ryan Reynolds, and it passed DARPA's deepfake detector. So I got a little bit of validation of my own. If I can be Ryan Reynolds, I can be anybody. So red teams can be a great way to surface process issues, raise awareness, to the very real risks of deepfakes that we're going to be facing for a very, very long time. Oh, and they're just getting way, way better, and just by the day. So it seems like so that's that. And then we've got a shift from data theft to data poisoning. What's that all about? So data theft, they steal your PII, they monetize it, they use it to do other bad things, right? It usually becomes pretty evident that there's a problem pretty quickly when you've got a data theft issue. But data poisoning, that is more of the silent killer. That's the carbon monoxide, right? A massive retailer was telling us that they were running into supply chain issues with trucks showing up in the middle of nowhere in places where they were not supposed to. And as they started to hunt down, they realized what the root cause, and it was not malicious, it was just an issue. And so they realized their AI-based supply chain was, those systems were being fed bad data, which was causing them to make crazy, weird decisions that a human never would do, right? So, and it even crashed completely. So specifically, it was blemishes and reflections in package labels that were being read in and processed as part of their, moving things around. And so something that was destined for, say, Arizona was being sent to Alaska, as an example. So in that case, it was just, a label that was partially torn off, or there was a reflection in it or something like that. So, but with AI increasingly taking on key business tasks and making business decisions, or decisions like shipping decisions and supply chain decisions, this is a pathway for some very subtle attacks that can be way more powerful than data theft. Okay, so AI's entirely data dependent. Decision engines, AI systems, all rely on underlying data. It can be financial transaction data, stock prices, security telemetry. It could be HR stuff. It could be manufacturing SCADA telemetry. It can be clinical trial data for pharmas and biotech. It can be market data or intelligence, and things like that. So if an attacker can abuse the integrity of the data going into or feeding these types of systems on which decisions rely, then they can cause a whole bunch of harm. So poisoning that raw data, that can happen before it enters the model. It can happen during ingestion through some type of maybe an API, or maybe compromising an upstream vendor's API that whose data feeds your model. It might be done through prompt injection in different ways, where they're poisoning not necessarily the data set itself, but the context window or the prompts that system is incorporating into its ongoing memory or context there. And so you should be factoring these poisoning scenarios into if you're running AI as an attack surface, into your threat modeling activities. So what could go wrong, right? How do we prevent against it? And really just try to use your imagination with that. And then you can validate that on the back end through pen testing and things like that, to ensure that those decision systems that you have are included attack surface in red team engagements, either as a trophy target or as a link in the attack chain that you're pursuing within that red team engagement. And also, don't forget the tabletops, right? Come up with your worst case, hairiest situation of AI abuse. If you don't have major AI chatbot decision making systems, well, we'll all be vulnerable to deepfake stuff. So you could actually do a really nefarious deepfake situation involving an executive or something like that. But the key is to plan ahead for it, and how would you respond to it? What would you do? What teams would be involved, and things like that. And then we have, the soft underbelly, which is cloud, SaaS, AI supply chains. We work with organizations, as I mentioned, of all types, sizes, ranging from more traditional organizations on one side. These are ones that host their own data centers. They are big Windows shops. They host their own Active Directory, their own core tech. There's a whole bunch of toys to work with on that as a red team. And then on the other side, you have companies that are serverless, almost entirely SaaS, no domain. A bunch of developers with MacBooks, or the ones that don't have MacBooks have Chromebooks, what my team calls hipster tech. These are environments where nearly all of the attack surface exists outside, and they don't really have an internal network. It's all a bunch of SaaS services that they use to do their work. A lot of offensive security firms kind of work that way as well. no real pivoting and lateral movement from host to host, for example. But in those SaaS native organizations, that attack surface, it doesn't just shrink or go away. It actually moves elsewhere to a third party. That's where the actual host to host pivoting would happen. So the attack surface for you is in large part identity. Okay, so it's relationships. It is the SaaS to SaaS trust relationships that are there. It's developer pipelines, and it's the human trust layer. It is third-party integrations, and of course, it's data and the systems that process your data. So we look at first identity. Okay, in a serverless, in one of those hipster tech serverless, even in the non that use some element of SaaS, we all do. SaaS heavy companies, identity compromise is usually enterprise compromise. It usually equates to, I got an identity, that identity allowed me to compromise the entire, all the data, all the things. Okay, so identity comes to the center, front and center of their attack surface, and that becomes the major focus. So it's about finding the one or the few identities, human or machine, can be a service account, for example, that open up that SaaS ecosystem to us. So through things like OAuth token abuse, which is a common thing for us, finding misconfigured conditional access or IDP, looking at MFA weaknesses, things like testing for push fatigue. If we send a whole bunch of alerts to somebody's, phone saying, hey, we need to, click to authorize this MFA, eventually, most of them just give in and just say, I'm tired of this. I just want it to shut up, so I'm going to do it, right? And that's a push fatigue attack. It's an actual attack or threat that they do. It's doing things like looking at shared or overprivileged service accounts or role-based access control within your SaaS apps and things. It's hijacking browser sessions. That is kind of the focus of these more SaaS-focused attack surfaces there. But then lateral movement, very, very different. It's not pivot to another host. Again, it's maybe pivot to other platforms using OAuth permissions and APIs. So when organizations are super heavy SaaS, the most vulnerable parts of that attack surface are things like their CI/CD pipelines. If you're developing code, it is a source, often it is a source of keys and credentials and secrets for us. Maybe we'll find vulnerabilities in internally developed code, just because we now have access to the source code of it, or possibly even update the code and insert some kind of a backdoor or something like that. So CI/CD pipelines, GitHub apps and runners is another thing for us. Build pipelines, we go after that significantly. And it's also about secrets management systems. So like, for example, CyberArk, right? How do we compromise that? Because we know that is the thing that unlocks all the other things. So it's AI agents. That's your soft underbelly. That's very much something that, is attack surface for you. But, there's still data, right? Even the hipster techs, have a database somewhere. It just might not be on their perimeter itself or within their perimeter or systems that they host and control. But it's about, more than anything, finding ways to escalate AWS IAM role privileges more so than, for example, system vulnerabilities, which we might emphasize more on traditional networks there. So we had a recent SaaS provider that had us do a red team for them. They started with an assumed breach with Zscaler applications. So we had their dashboard, the Zscaler applications dashboard that they gave us access to a few real basic general use applications like Slack and G Suite and Zoom and things like that. Maybe 1Password, I think, was in there, but also had access to GitHub and some others, right, which had hundreds of repos in there. So we started looking at source code. We gained some secrets. We gained a GitHub personal access token. We gained SSH keys from that, right? Pretty much game over at this point already. So that GitHub repo gave us a token for Evidence Trial Artifactory. That Slack and Google, we were looking at those, and those were also sources for some secrets for us. We found that GitHub PAT tokens were being shared through different ways, different development and support processes there, and we have used that. By the end of this cascade of gaining credentials and using those credentials, we had a very quick path to full access to Salesforce data and pretty much all other cloud environments in scope. So again, this was almost entirely identity focused, and that's all we needed. We didn't exploit any vulnerabilities. It's just identity is what we were going after there, and human human decisions there. So this is definitely not something that we're just seeing or hearing from you guys. And ENISA, which is Europe's agency for cybersecurity, had pointed to state-linked intrusions from Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, which involved supply chain compromise, such as breaches affecting IT service providers, software repositories, and things like that. And they really emphasize that attacks on third-party dependencies can easily cascade into entirely different ecosystems there. So this is front and center. It's not just something we're hearing or seeing ourselves. And a lot of this brings us back to the source of most security gaps, and that is people, humans. We make bad decisions, or we make decisions that are favoring making things work over making things work securely. It's that old, I think it says, make it work soon, or make it work securely, choose two. We're busy people. All of us are. We make decisions, just to make problems go away, just like that MFA fatigue, thing that I told you about there. We can be manipulated, right? So attackers go after help desks, just like Scattered Spider, who are super, super helpful, to them as help desks. So IT admins, they also go after them as well. Deepfake sophistication is adding a level of new difficulty and sophistication there. So these SaaS native serverless environments, it's less about servers and it's more about the identity integrations. It's more about the human layer and about identity there, and about data. So most of those related to AI in some way or another, either on the attacker capability side or on the defender attack surface side. And several of our customers are finding really awesome novel ways to use AI in defensive capabilities, like such as for triaging tier 1 SOC and things like that. It is very promising. So it's helping both sides pretty much. The only thing you don't want to do is just not do it, right? You got to be doing something there. And so AI definitely a major a factor in both attack and defense. So that brings us to, I kind of covered this and weaved it kind of in with each one of those, but how can red teaming help us get a better handle? So you want to make sure your red team scenarios are using modern tooling. So since that is what you're up against now, is the modern tooling, including agentic AI and LLMs and things like that. So make sure whoever's doing your red teaming is effectively incorporating that. If you have things like chatbots or other agentic AI in use, as many of you do, weave those into either as trophy targets again, or as links in the attack chain, either as a means to an end, or what you're looking to get in terms of fireworks, right? And you will gain a whole bunch of insight and clarity around the things you need to address there. And then for the identity side of things that we talked about, red teaming very naturally will validate the effectiveness of controls you have, right? That's kind of table stakes. Your MFA approaches around trust, your provisioning of service accounts, those things, those pretty much happen in any red team by a good red team. So just having red team engagements is most of that battle, and responding to them, taking the results seriously. And then when it comes to testing that third-party supply chain, right, there's a lot of value to doing assume breach type approaches, starting with some kind of compromised system or user or service account, just as we did with the SaaS company that I mentioned there. Yes, red teams can very easily go from nothing, start from nothing, completely outside your perimeter with no access. We do it all the time, but let's be real, right? So it's going to be possible for an attacker over time to get into your network in one way or another. Okay, with enough time and effort, they're going to get in. So you might want to focus on, all of your time, your energy, your resources on, the other side of that equation. So user awareness, sad choices, they are always going to be a problem for us in the security world. You will never, ever, ever get to perfect security awareness culture in your organization. It is a curve that asymptotically approaches that x-axis, but it will never hit zero. It'll never cross zero. You will never get perfect 100% human decision-making within your organization. So your number one focus on that issue of social engineering should be on the safety net of controls that you put around your users. Not so much, I mean, yes, we always need to practice good security so that we avoid it entirely, but okay, answer the question, what if? What if this detonated? What if this person clicked on this link? Do we implement sinkholing, or do we implement, proper email gateway controls and things to detect a lot of those types of things, prevent the callback from C2 and those kinds of things there. So that's usually where your greatest value is. So heavily leverage, assume breach as much as possible. It's just a matter of time before the next log 5J or whatever it is comes out, and there's a 0-day that affects everybody's perimeter, right? It's just a matter of time before some new employee gets tricked, especially now with the more convincing pretext from AI and things like that. It's just going to happen. So focus on the safety net. And then a lot of companies in 2023 and 24, still to this day, were focused on ransomware red teams specifically. That was the buzzword. That was what everybody was trying to do. And because ransomware traverses so many different control areas and parts of your business, it's actually a really, really great approach. And it solves problems in other attack types beyond ransomware as well. So it is a great one to do. I still recommend doing ransomware red teams. They are usually super valuable and provide a lot of insight for companies. Not all offensive security providers, I don't need to tell you this, right? Not all of them are created equally. Some of them will use their red team to sell their defensive services or something else. It's not their priority to give you the red team. It's really something else that they want to get you. Others call what they do red teaming, and it's really kind of half the price of what a real red team would be, but it's really more vulnerability focused and not around scenarios. Know that purple teaming is probably the most loaded term in all of offensive security. I've heard people refer to purple team as what I described as the end-to-end. So sometimes you might get much, much better prices by, just people's definitions of what it is. And then you might not be happy with the results because things weren't apples to apples there. So a lot of companies waste their money because the marketing claims don't match the service as well. So how do you know you've got a good one? What do you look at? And this is something that I can provide a lot of insight into here. So, you want a partner who's actually going to emulate adversaries. Okay. So not just give you a list of vulnerabilities and misconfigurations or a lot of things that, Joe hacker, can find, right? Is it something that's actively being exploited? Make sure that the operations that they're doing are actually emulating adversaries that you care about. I hate to mention, I hate that I even have to mention that, but there are firms that do that and call it red teaming. I think if you know which adversaries concern you, either by the category, hey, I'm concerned about ransomware, right? You don't have to name names, or you can, maybe Scattered Spider is someone you're concerned about, or some of the similars. Then feel that out in your initial conversations with your red team. Are they going to do anything different with that information, or are they just going to give you the same, approach they were planning on doing? And are they going to devise, those scenarios into the attack plan there? But, a red team for a bank is going to be very different than one for a pharmaceutical or a law firm or a streaming provider or, a university or a professional baseball team, right? They all have very, very different trophies and scenarios of concern or outcomes that they want to avoid. So, to what level does your red team provider understand you, and do they talk specific scenarios with you that are tailored to your business, or are they more of a generic, this is our cost for it, we come in and we do this A to Z, type of a thing there. So, kind of related to this, when I do go in and do red team program builds, right? We go and we help through a series of workshops, we help companies build their own internal FTE staffed red teams to do engagements there, right? And when I do that, usually their incentive, the reason why they're doing it is because their existing red team is broken. They're not working at the level that they want them to, and they're usually struggling for one or more reasons, and almost never. In fact, I can say never is that reason the tech chops of the red team. Usually those red teamers, they know how to attack. They know how to do these things, right? Where they fail is, more relating to business context. So first, the slate of operations that they choose for the year or for the long term do not resonate with executive stakeholders. So planning is not strategic, or they lack any kind of planning at all. And secondly, findings are speaking in technical terms and not in business impact terms. It's more of a left brain logical report. We gain domain admin through this, curb roasting or whatever, which is going to mean nothing to the business side. Who's going to it's going to resonate more through, or they're going to be more interested in narratives or stories that kind of say, okay, we proved an ability for the most basic of employee access to be able to see all transaction activities or all of the SOC dashboard, where they can see kind of all the activity that's happening, bad activity that's happening, right? That's going to resonate more with them when you kind of weave in the business, both as trophy targets and be able to mention impact as well. But, we try to do this with our customers. We try to tailor every engagement to your business. We do something called architecture and attack graphing. We work with you to build a visual of how, this is collaborative with you, to build a visual of how an attacker looks at your core technologies, of how they look at your attack surface. So your domains, your trust relationships, your IDPs, your crown jewels, those kinds of things are all mapped onto a visual for you. And then the other piece of that is the attack graph, where if you imagine starting states, which might be completely outside your network, it might be inside your network with a certain level of access, it might be a privileged user, those types of things. It might be a phished, or compromised individual or something like that. And then we show that on the far left and on the far right, it's all the trophy targets that you want us to go after. And everything in between is steps that are mapped to the MITRE ATT&CK framework to achieve those trophy targets that we've predefined with you. So that's how we try to tailor. So I would say if you can kind of get sample deliverables up front from your red team provider, a final report, what does that look like? Anything like architecture to attack graphing or whatever, how they're adapting the program to you, you can get an early look as to, is this generic or is this really tailored to me specifically? Third, I think firms might be careless, right? They might cross scope boundaries. They might give them no heed. They might harm the environment. They might not clean up after themselves. They might not be communicative with your trusted insider group that knows there's a red team as much as you would want. So you want to ask key questions around, how do you ensure you don't topple systems over accidentally? How would you handle deconfliction? If an actual security event were happening in my environment, would you just continue, and those kinds of things as well. Chances are someone who has worked with that potential firm that you're thinking of working with, and you might be able to get some feedback there. But lastly, red team operation reports should be scenario based. If you're looking at the executive summary and it says 4 criticals, 10 highs, 2 mediums, you might just be looking at more of a pen test and not a red team that's more scenario based. What you should be getting is we tried these 5 scenarios. This one was partially detected. This one was fully prevented, for example, and more of a scenario by scenario view. You still want the number of criticals, high, medium, and low, but that's not the point. That's not the primary point of a red team. And so lastly, that reporting should be focusing on the 3 different types of insights that are going to be of value, and all of them have different work streams. So you're going to have number 1, you're going to have detection insights, and those are the types that are going to go to a SOC or a content management team over the logging platform. So, some bad activity happened and it didn't escalate into an incident or was marked as a false positive. Those should be mapped to the MITRE ATT&CK as TTPs, and those can take like hours or days to fix. And then you have vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. These are usually more about one-off things. This system is missing this patch, for example. There's going to be a mapping usually to a CVE or some kind of a similar identifier there. Those are going to triage through your vulnerability management teams per their SLAs. And then thirdly, you have thematic findings. Now, these are the types of things that are going to have a very long tail of remediation. There are going to be things like, we're lacking an enterprise password management standard. We're going to have to budget for one, deploy it, incorporate it, and things like that. Or we have a flat network with no segmentation, right? So that's going to instantiate a lot of projects. These are usually going to go to your GRC or risk-focused parts of your organization to track to completion on that. So make sure that they're kind of delineating between some of those types of findings there. So those are some hopefully things. There's a lot more to red teaming, and we have a lot more resources. Happy to share with you guys to help you along, wherever you are on your journey. And if I can help any way, please feel free to reach out. I love working with internal red teams, especially to kind of learn from them ways that they're doing things, as well as to kind of share ways that we're doing things. And so I love doing that. But I'm specifically in red teaming for a reason, and it is because I have seen it create great change and insights and clarity in ways that no other approaches really are able to do. I've been part of real customer journeys, where they've gone from zero to hero by taking these things to heart. And I've seen, I've been a CISO myself, so I've seen this from that perspective and learned more about the value of red teaming as a CISO than I did over the many years I did building red teams themselves. So we're happy to support you however you need. Here's a list of different resources. You can feel free to reach out to any of us. Happy to share that with you there. So wanted to pivot to questions here. So I'm just going to kind of read through these. All right. So are any of the tools that you use for red teaming open source? Absolutely. This is a great question. So yeah, we do like Suro for cloud, based types of things. We have, we've released a lot of our own open source tools. If you think of C2 platforms, which are really kind of central to red teaming, a lot of the best red teams use something called Sliver that was developed by Bishop Fox people, and my team does a lot of the ongoing development in Sliver there. So there's a lot of really good open source tools. It is full of great tools for red teaming. But yeah, those are just a few that we are closely connected with there. If you use Threat Locker, would we need to disable it, or would you still be able to run a successful red? We have done red teams against Threat Locker. You would not need to. We have, however, been in environments where there are specific controls where it, if that control were not there, then we might be able to do things that are insightful and important for them to know. So sometimes the customer will say, I know you can do this without, and spin your wheels on this. I'd like to disable it so that I can get more to brass tacks and other, so that I can work on defense in depth and not be 100% reliant on that particular control. So that's a really good question. Thank you for that. And I think that's pretty much it. All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And this will also be available if you want to kind of go back and review it again. Have a good day.